is it about fast fashion and especially ultra fast fashion do you think that makes it so addictive, especially for young people?
I think mainly the illusion that it's cheap and that you're getting a good deal, when in reality you
Mm,
end up buying more clothing of poorer quality. And also, I think the rate at which the ultra fast fashion brands pump out new clothing kind of indoctrinates shoppers into thinking that they need to keep up and turn around the items
mm,
in their personal wardrobes at the same rate. So, in some ways, it feels like the brands kind of set the pace and then consumers follow. And also, from my perspective, I love having variety in my wardrobe. I wouldn't say that I've ever been addicted to fashion, but I like to have a lot of different styles of clothing. So when people talk about having a capsule wardrobe, I just know that's never going to be me. So I do relate to the idea that you want to have different styles of clothing and want to follow trends. So I can see when a brand is really giving you all of those options. And yeah, adding new styles on a daily basis, even how that can be really appealing if you do want to experiment with your style.
yeah. Yeah, there's multiple points there that I would love to touch on. First, this idea of keeping up, I think, is something that is just so well said. Like these brands, the way they advertise, the way they market, it makes you feel like you have to be constantly checking the new arrivals to like keep up because they're sending you those notifications, they're sending you the emails. You feel like you're missing out. This FOMO, you're gonna miss out if you don't check out the new arrivals. Is that something that anybody spoke to when you were interviewing individuals for your article?
One of my interviewees who was from Australia was talking about going to parties on a weekly basis.
Mm,
And so she spoke about keeping up in terms of like keeping up appearances and
mhm.
making sure that you've got something new and interesting to wear to each party every week. So, yeah, she definitely spoke about that from more of a peer pressure kind of cliquey like high school teenager perspective, but not so much from a brand perspective. And I do feel a
Mm,
lot of people who are addicted to shopping are interested in shopping and buying and wearing clothes and not so much interested in fashion. And I think those kinds of people are more influenced by brands who can actually sell them the clothing that they can wear rather than what's going on in the fashion world more broadly, whether it's a luxury brand setting a trend that they might not be able to buy or participate in, or watching what people are wearing at the Met Gala or equivalent red
mhm.
carpet, which won't necessarily be something that they can wear. So I think there's also this distinction between being interested in clothes just because you want to buy them and wear them, and then just following the trends that brands are pumping out versus being really interested in fashion and looking at what different people are wearing and maybe what indie designers are doing, and looking at really unique styles and people who are trailblazing in the fashion industry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting take. And I totally see that with the parties, what you were saying at the beginning. You can see every time someone goes out, they want to have a new outfit. I mean, I think um I was just sort of immersed in that a few years ago. Like even today, friends will say that they're getting a new outfit for a wedding, that they're going to a bachelorette party, and they're going out for the weekend. They need a new outfit, and it's something that it's like, yeah, it's it probably started from the brands. I mean, I don't know the history of how this all happened, but I'm sure it started from like brand messaging and then sort of funneled down into peer groups. And then it's like you're surrounded by it. And then it becomes the quote unquote cultural norm almost. And that is something really, really difficult to break. So, can you speak to the advertising and marketing tactics that these brands are using to get people hooked and kind of contribute to this idea that it's normal to overconsume and constantly buy new cheap clothes all the time.
Yeah, continuing on from talking about parties and kind of keeping up with social engagements and using that as an excuse to buy. There's a lot of language relating to newness and low prices, which works really well for brands, but also the way that they market a whole vibe or idea. So I went on Pretty Little Things Twitter because I know they always tweet just like bizarre stuff. And they tweeted some pictures of one of their bikinis, and the tweet read, "Dreamy summer getaways need the perfect outfits. Get island ready with all new in." And I think it's this kind of
Mm.
language that gets people thinking about a certain vibe they want to give off or an outfit to go with a certain setting that they're going to be in. And I know not so much these days, but back in the day when Vanessa Hudgens was like in her prime at Coachella, every time Coachella would come around, I'd be like, oh, like I just want to live out my like boho dreams. So I really do get it when you see a brand kind of pushing a certain aesthetic and you want to be a part of it, or you want to feel like you're part of a setting that you're actually not part of by dressing the part. I can see how people fall victim to that kind of marketing. And then also there's cookies. So web servers use cookies to track users' browsing activity and store information about them. So shoppers get served ads for items they were already looking for or items similar to what they've purchased online before. So these fast fashion ads may appear on unrelated websites, making it harder for addicts to avoid looking at fast fashion. And even sometimes when I have not searched for something online, but I've spoken about it, I always tell my family how our phones are listening to us. So even when you talk about something, sometimes you start getting served ads for it. And it's a bit scary how that happens, but you really just can't escape it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. You really can't escape it. It's sort of from all ends. And I used to work in marketing. I mean, to some extent, it's still part of my work running like a website, but like what you were saying about the terminology used, for instance, in the Pretty Little Thing tweets, like that sounds exactly like something I used to write, which is like embarrassing to admit, but it's true. It's like that's sort of just the messaging that's like trickled down throughout the company, and you don't even necessarily think that you're doing anything wrong. And I don't blame the individuals who are just doing their job and getting their paycheck, but you can see how it's just so embedded in like, this is what you should write. This is in the brand guidelines or whatever, and this is how we talk. And it's just perpetuated until somebody starts to question it and pause and be like, actually, should we be framing it like this? And that's something really exciting with slow fashion and sort of transitioning that and defining what is marketing in a slow fashion world. What does that look like? But something that is very relevant to marketing is like influencers, and we can see the huge like dichotomy with like fast fashion influencers versus maybe slow fashion thought leaders, I guess, or content creators. Sometimes I hesitate to call them like influencers, but anyway, what role do you think that fast fashion social media influencers play in this culture of overconsumption?
I think these influencers seem like normal shoppers to a lot of their followers. And I think that normalizes overconsumption when in reality, those influencers are probably much wealthier than their followers and are perhaps even sponsored by the brands whose clothing they're showing on their Instagram page or in their YouTube videos. So, fast fashion brands are majorly profiting off of marketing through influencers in a personable, chatty style that shoppers are more likely to fall for than a billboard or generic ad.
Hmm.
So, really, I think it's quite sneaky on the brand's part. And I think, especially a lot of young people, they think that they know the influencers that they follow and they begin to trust them. And there are lots of people who I like following on social media, but if I see them doing something that it feels it doesn't really align with my values, I can give them the benefit of the doubt, but also I don't know them personally, and I understand that they're essentially running a business. They're working with brands, yeah, as like to provide for themselves, or at least like provide for themselves and then some, like live quite a luxe lifestyle in a lot of cases. So yeah, I think it's that kind of illusion that these influencers are just like us.